Hello everyone, we're in Pirkei Avot, third parak, Mishnah 4. Let's see what it says. So Rabbi Chanina ben Chakinai Omer. Rabbi Chananya ben Chakinai said, Haneor balayla, one who stays awake at night, v'hamalech baderech yechidi, or one who walks on the way alone, v'faneh libo lavatala, and one who turns his heart to idle matters, harei ze mitchayev benafsho. Behold, this man is mortally guilty. Now, what's the take on these three? Are these three, in fact, different things, or do they kind of loop together? So we'll start with the Maharal. Maharal doesn't understand them as three. We'll get to that in a moment. But let's tackle the first one. Haneor balayla. One who stays awake at night is mortally guilty. Why? So it says the Maharal, because night is not a time of the normal state of the world. And because it's outside of the normal state, it's outside of Hashem's protection. Now you might want to understand, what's so bad about staying up at night? So he quotes a Gemara in Eruvin that says, look, a night is meant only for sleeping or for learning. That's it. That's all it's meant for. If you're not doing one of those two things, then you're out. Again, we'll mitigate this in a moment. And this, I think, is much easier to understand, certainly pre-electricity. The Torah is relevant at all times, even post-electricity. But the idea is, if anyone's ever gone camping, I remember when I did, and once darkness fell and there's literally nothing you can do. I remember even when I wanted to read, I was going to start taking valuable battery life with my flashlight. So I just figured I was literally lying I couldn't be outside because you couldn't see anything. Even in my tent, I couldn't see anything. And you just kind of fell asleep. It was like 8 or 8:30, but it was completely dark. There was nothing you could see or do. And as a result, what would you be doing up? Probably nothing good. But I think even now, I think for most teenagers probably could relate to this. And even honestly, when you get older, it could be your spouse coming in or your parents or whoever, and they'll see you up. It's late at night, and you're like, what are you doing? What are you doing up? Go to sleep, right? It could be 11 p.m. or 2 a.m., depending on what your schedule is. But the point is, what is a person doing up at this late? You'll never say that to somebody at 2 p.m. in the afternoon or, again, 11 a.m. It's the day, so you're up. That's what you're doing. But at night, we're particularly sensitive to it because night is not meant to be a time where people are awake. You're supposed to, again, either be sleeping or doing something productive. And we'll get, again, back to this idea in just a moment. The next idea that the Maharal takes on is actually he skips v'hamalech baderech yechidi. That's the second part he deals. That's his last part that he really deals with. He goes instead v'hamefaneh libo lavatala. It's one turns his heart to idle matters. Now again, this person is also mitchayev benafsho. He's mortally guilty. Why? So here, the Maharal says, is because when it comes to a person who's awake at night, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's doing something like he's handling idle matters. That doesn't necessarily mean that. But here, this person, in fact, is turning towards idleness. And it's not only that he happens to be doing something kind of like some nonsense for a little bit, in terms of he's doing so purposely. This person is explicitly and directly focusing his energy on doing nothing. And that too is completely outside of the natural order of things. The way Maharal says it is, there's nothing in nature that literally does nothing. They don't just sit idly. Everything is busy doing something, even if it's like algae growing. Okay, that's what it does. But the point is it's active. For a person to actively be effectively completely turning off any productive function is a huge problem. And now, before he turns on to the walking alone, Maharal makes 2 points. First, he says that there are some people who actually understand the first and last point going together in terms of haneor balayla v'hamefaneh libo lavatala, a person who's up at night doing nothing. Those two ideas are actually related. The Maharal does not like that, and he says that can't be the case because otherwise the Mishnah would have just combined them and said have a person who's haneor balayla v'hamefaneh libo lavatala as one combined idea. He says that's not what it means, and therefore you can forget about that pshat. And he says that for 2 reasons. First, just grammatically it doesn't work in terms of you could just combine them, so why would it separate them and literally put them at opposite ends of the Mishnah? Moreover, he says when a person goes to sleep, right, often they kind of start thinking about nothing, right? They're just kind of letting their mind drift and then they fall asleep. A person's not chayav benafsho for that. Literally, that's how a person falls asleep. What do you want them to do? So that's one, and that's probably a bit of a more technical reading and kind of almost amusing. It's seriously, what is the person supposed to do when they're going to sleep? Start thinking about all the tasks he's supposed to do tomorrow. Maybe that is a great way of going to sleep. Who knows? But that's Maharal's first response. Maharal also says something beautiful that I'd really like to quote inside, and it's relevant to most of us. And he says, this. I'll just quote it directly. So it doesn't appear correct to say that you're dealing with anybody who's awake at all. A person who's doing work at night, even if he's not necessarily like occupying himself with the Torah, right? Any Torah that doesn't have malacha accompanying it is batal. It's not going to work. Those two things can't work together in terms of if you want Torah, you have to do malacha. Right? With the work that you do, which is Torah oriented, we're not talking about this principle. If you're up for that, then that's good. All derech eretz is a mitzvah. Now, what he means by derech eretz here, I'm not entirely sure. Derech eretz can actually mean to a few different things, but I think here is like the simple. The derech eretz can also mean like good character, but here I think it means working. If a person needs to work at night, then that's fine. I mean, a person needs to support himself. Derech eretz to mitzvah, and therefore that's okay. I thought that was wonderful to see. So those are the first two. What about walking alone, right? Right? Such a person is mitchev nafsho. So there the Maharal says also something very beautiful. He says it is actually he says every person has a place. He says right? Everyone is supposed to be from a place in terms of it's if you're from Chicago or if you're from X, a person is often associated with where they're from. In fact, that's where the I believe even the Torah and certainly the Mishnah and the Gemara will often identify people by their location. So and so Arami, and the Mishnah will have like Talmudai because they're from Talmud. This is their location. In Mishnahs in Sot, I've recently been learning. There again, this woman is specifically identified by her place, and we see like why is it? Is that just like an easy way of identifying someone? And the way the Maharal wants to understand it is no. In fact, it actually matters lehalacha. When it comes with respect to gittin, we're supposed to put identifying information what this person's name is and even where they're from. And there's a psak in a gittin, again, speak to your local rav, so to make sure what I'm saying is correct. But he says a person who's shina shem icha v'shem yero, hu nechshav kol shina shmo v'shma. It's as if he changed his name. And in fact, that is a psul in gittin. If a person gets the wrong name for the place that the person comes from, or they swap the husband's name, like the husband's place for the wife's place, that's a psul in the get. You've actually invalidated the get because there's something so fundamental where we're from. And this is where we veer a little away from the Maharal. Rabbi Cohen points out a really beautiful pshat in the Torah in Rashi. He says, first, when the end of Parsha Bereshit is talking about the kind of the descent of humanity, effectively, that eventually leads to the flood, he talks about one critical part, which introduces us to Lamech. Lamech had two wives. Not going to go there right now, but that was a serious problem. And Ada, Vatiled Ada et Yaval, Hu haya avi Yoshev ohel umikneh. Right, Ada bore Yabal. He was the father of those who dwell in a tent and with livestock. What does that mean? Says Rashi. I'm just going to read it in English just because it's easier. So what does it mean? The father of those who dwell in a tent and with livestock. He was the first of those who graze animals in deserts, and he would dwell in tents a month here and a month there because of pasture for his flock. When the pasture would be exhausted in one place, he would go and pitch his tent in another place. And a Gadik Midrash says that this verse means he would build houses for idolatry. What is the connection between being a person who pastures his flock here and there with idolatry? Says Rabbi Jack Cohen, a beautiful pshat. He says, because such a person isn't planting himself in one place and making himself useful and developing the area. There is something very ennobling about a person who kind of settles. This is where they live, and they're going to help they're going to effectively kind of plant roots there and help everything else around them grow and blossom and flourish. A person who's kind of a bit of a nomad, he goes here, he goes there, he's kind of like extracting resources from wherever he goes. That's no good. The Torah is not a big fan of that. In fact, it's well known that people who are nomadic, right, they're almost like they're really just kind of drain resources from wherever they go because they're not staying and planting and building and developing the place they're in. And I'll end with this final comment from Rabbi Aharon Lichteinstein, who's a former Rosh Yeshiva. I believe he died in 2015. Says, let's look at how God, like what God's task is to man when he places him in the garden. So what does it say? We're in, again, Parashat Bereshit, chapter 2, verse 15. Vayikach Hashem Elokim et ha'adam vayanicheu vegan eden le'avda u'l'shamra. Hashem God took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to guard it, or to cultivate it and to guard it. So we see that one of man's jobs is to cultivate the world around him. And this is even though there are many Maharal Chazal that tell us that the Garden of Eden was actually perfect already. But we see from this that there is a fundamental precept that a person is meant to build and to cultivate and to effectively help develop things around them. And so a person a person who turns on the way alone, he's effectively kind of first, he's a wanderer, he's a loner, he doesn't want to connect to other people, he wants to be by himself, and there's something fundamentally wrong with that. A person who helps build a society, build a community, there's something fundamental about that. That's actually built in to the natural order of the world, as we see from God. God placed Adam to cultivate. You're meant to build the things around you, and a person who's kind of stumbling along, wandering, doesn't do that. I'll end with the Rambam that is quoted by Rav Aharon Lichteinstein. He talks about how the halachas of a person who plays with dice. A gambler, right? Does he have to be a professional gambler? Is it just kind of a person who does this just casually on the side for fun? What's the din with regards to such a person? So, Rambam says it's specifically a person who has no other profession. What he does professionally is gamble. And the quote Rambam: one who plays dice with a Gentile does not transgress the prohibition of stealing, but he does transgress the prohibition of occupying oneself with worthless things. For it is not suitable for a person to occupy himself all the days of his life with anything other than matters of wisdom and developing of the world. And Rav Lichteinstein says what is relevant to us is his definition of the two things a person should be engaged in: Divrei Chachma and Yeshuvo Shel Olam. A person who's a mefaneh b'derech yechidi, who's just kind of wandering alone by himself, not relating to other people or the world around him, such a person is mitchayev b'nafsho. He owes his life because he's effectively turned away from this natural order of things. We'll leave it over there.